an opportunity, I will invite observers to ask any questions at the end of the meeting. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us today. We haven't received any apologies for absence, so none to note this morning. And I haven't been alerted to any specific declarations of interest for items on the agenda. I will just pause momentarily in case anyone wants to make a declaration, but I'm not aware of any that have been brought to my attention. Okay, thank you. So moving on then to item 4, which is questions from the public. Now, we have in fact received a question from the public, so I'm going to take the opportunity to read that out. The question is from David Trigger, who's a patient representative. Thank you, David, for taking the time and trouble to submit a question in advance. The question is, according to the Office for National Statistics, Worcestershire has one of the highest percentage of over 65s in the country. How does this affect service design? So Simon, if I can ask you to respond to that question.
Yeah, thank you, Christiane. So my name is Simon Trickett. I'm the Chief Executive of NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Board. So thank you for the question, David. This was submitted in somewhat unconventional fashion on a piece of paper slipped to me whilst I was at the Health Watch meeting yesterday that David was also attending. But fair play to him for getting in first, and he'll always have the proud record of being the first person to submit a question to this governing body. Very simply, David, we talk a lot about population health management, about places and primary care networks owning their service infrastructure. You're absolutely right to point out that we've got a number of particular demographic challenges in Herefordshire and Worcestershire, one of which is not the only one, but one of which is the relatively older nature of some of our communities. Clearly, what we will be looking to do, because we want to have this population health management approach, clearly what we'll be looking to do is to design and develop services with all of that population health need in mind. So, you know, it's very, very difficult, and it wouldn't be appropriate for me to give particular examples, but I think it's a really good opportunity to absolutely emphasise that is what this approach that we are now going to be undertaking is all about. So we want to really understand the population health needs of our communities. We want that to be owned at very local level, at place, so in the 2 counties, and at primary care network level, so the neighbourhoods, the districts in Worcestershire that you're familiar with. And we want plans to emerge that absolutely reflect those population health needs. So a good question and a good way of emphasising really how important that will be moving forward.
Thank you very much, Simon, for responding to that, and thank you again, David, for raising the question. So I'm going to move us on then to item 5, which is the conflicts of interest register. So Hannah, do you want to make a comment about this?
Thank you, Christiane. Yes, so clearly the way ICB will manage conflicts of interest will be really important. And later on in the meeting, I will be seeking the board's approval of the ICB conflicts of interest and code of conduct policy. But at this point, really, I just wanted you to formally note and approve the full register of conflicts of interest of board members, noting the need for transparency in relation to conflicts of interest across all levels of operation of the ICB.
Thank you, Hannah. So can I take it the board members note and receive that assurance and we can record that in the minutes. Thank you. Okay. Hannah, is that sufficient on that item? We can move on?
Yes, that's great. Thank you, Christiane. Thank you.
So obviously the key purpose of today is the formal establishment, and the inaugural meeting was specifically required to enable us to establish the new body that took over from the CCG as of midnight tonight. But we felt it would be opportune really to take a moment to remind ourselves of the purpose, and Simon has sort of already in his answer started talking a bit about the rationale for why we're here. And I'll introduce Simon to do that more fully in a moment. But I did want to take the opportunity to say a few words, and first of all to say thank you to CCG staff. You know, the CCG sort of formally closed at midnight last night, and actually a lot of people, you know, helped the CCG on its journey to where we are today. So I particularly wanted to recognise the contribution. I know many of them will be with us on this particular journey as well, but it felt important to say that. I also want to just thank and recognise everybody who actually was involved in setting up the new organisation. These things are no small feats. They require a lot of work behind the scenes, and across the country that the NHS staff have had to respond to that. So I particularly wanted to recognise Hannah's team and David's team. I'm sure there are many others who were involved in that, but I know there was a lot of work in getting all of this together so that we could launch today. So I just wanted to say thank you. And particularly say, having gone to all of that effort and gone through that time, I think it's really, really important for us to say that we need to demonstrate as a board the benefit that we're going to deliver as a result of the change we're making. Otherwise, we'll have gone through this process for no value. So it's really, really important that all of us as a board really look to what benefits we're going to deliver for the people of Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And for me, this is all about, in very simple terms, a step change in collaboration and cooperation between us as partners represented here. And in that sense, I think, you know, some of the areas that we need to be looking at are shared decision making and planning, collective responsibility for the challenges that face us, but also then, you know, collectively driving forward improvements and taking forward the decisions that we make as a board. So I really just wanted to highlight that as sort of my context, my ambition, that we see a step change in that collaboration and cooperation. And ultimately, you know, we want to have delivered something better, a better care for our people, for our communities, and that's why we're all here. So, so a few words really to sort of set the tone for how I think we need to operate as a board. But I'll invite now Simon to say a bit more about the formal purpose of the ICB. Thank you, Simon. Simon, I think you may be on mute.
Thanks, Christine. Sorry about that. First technical error of the day. So I'm going to share some slides, and I think it's really important, and I can see that we'll be using a similar set of slides quite a bit over the coming weeks, because as we set out on our journey as a board, it's really important that we're clear about what we're here to do and what it is that's going to be different. So that's what I would hope to do over the next few minutes. And there's only a few slides, and I hope to be able to just talk colleagues through exactly what we're here to do, exactly what this is going to look like, and what our key priorities are going to be over the coming months. Very conscious as well, this meeting is being recorded, so clearly people can watch this back and find out more at a later date as well. So the first question really is our system, so Herefordshire and Worcestershire. So the best examples that people give me are, we're serving an area that is 2.5 times the size of Greater London, but with 1/10 of the population. And I think that statistic nicely puts into context the challenges we face. And going back a bit to David's question earlier, that's a very particular set of population health needs that require addressing through our integrated way of working. We have 2 counties. We have a unitary authority in Herefordshire. We have a 2-tier local authority in Worcestershire. So we have a county council, and we have district councils, 6 district councils, and you can see from the slide the vast collection of different bits of the system that make up the health and care system in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. And obviously one of the things that's important that we'll cover later on the agenda, the Integrated Care Board will be taking responsibility for more things as well. So in particular, community pharmacies, 96 dental practices who deliver NHS care, and 64 optometrists as well. So we're serving 800,000 people, and the total budget that we are now charged with, as of today, we are charged with being the guardians of £1.5 billion of public spend, which is obviously a considerable amount of money. So there are 4 bits that make up an integrated care system. So we are the Integrated Care Board. We are the legal statutory body, and we have replaced the CCG. We've taken all of their legal duties. We've taken all of their responsibilities. We've inherited all of their staff. And as of today, and as we go through the next 12 months, there'll be additional duties that are delegated from NHS England down to us as an Integrated Care Board. But we're only one part of the integrated care system. There's another really important activity, which is our partnership activity. So there will be an integrated care partnership established for Herefordshire and Worcestershire. This is where we really seek to engage the widest number and range of partners. It's where we really rely heavily on our local authority partners to guide us as to what our communities are saying, to help us understand those wider determinants of how healthy, what kind of a healthy life people can live. And it's equally relevant to both adult and children's services. So our integrated care partnership in Herefordshire and Worcestershire is going to be a combination of the 2 health and well boards. So we're really heavily reliant on Councillor Karen May in Worcestershire, Councillor Pauline Crockett in Herefordshire, who chair the health and wellbeing boards and have agreed to work together to jointly lead our integrated care partnership. And much more to come over the coming weeks around how that shapes up and the role that that's going to play in our operating model, because it's going to be really, really important. The third element, which is also equally as important. So increasingly, providers of NHS services are going to collaborate together more. So already we've seen lots of that in recent years. We already see, don't we, Wye Valley Trust collaborate with colleagues in South Warwickshire as part of that wider group. We now know that Worcestershire Acute Hospitals are also part of that group in an associate manner, and we're going to see increasing collaboration between providers. And I think that's going to be really important in Herefordshire and Worcestershire. You know, we have a number of services that are fragile from time to time. We've had a challenge, haven't we, which I know people are briefed on, around the haematology service in Herefordshire. And actually, it's a really important part of our model that when we have those types of challenges, the first place we'll turn is, okay, well, what additional benefit, what additional mitigation can we offer through the various different providers coming together and helping each other out? And actually, I think that's going to be absolutely essential as we move forward over the coming months. And the fourth and final bit, no less important, is our place-based partnerships. So we understand that subsidiarity is really important. We want decisions made as locally as possible. We understand the strong place-based identities of our 2 counties. We understand as well the really strong place-based identities below county level. So we've got a really strong set of primary care networks, groups of GP practices working together, and there is a really strong identity and local ownership of the issues most pertinent to them. And you will see as we go through the coming months, we're putting a great emphasis on that primary care network ownership of their local health needs and ownership of the actions they're going to be taking together with partners as well to try and improve those local health outcomes. So 4 equally important parts of the integrated care system. Us here today, the Integrated Care Board, will only be successful if those other 3 parts of the system work well as well. So what are we collectively seeking to achieve? So again, in the new legislation that's come into being today, there are 4 legal duties that we have, four main responsibilities that are the purpose of our Integrated Care Board and the wider integrated care system, and that they're listed there. So we're here to improve outcomes. I'm here, I turn up in the morning to do things that get residents of Herefordshire and Worcestershire better health outcomes than they otherwise would have got. So it's really important, I think, that we focus everything that we're doing on we're here to get better outcomes. We're in here to enhance productivity and value for money, particularly by encouraging and facilitating and enabling bits of the health and care system to work together in a better way than they would have done here before. We're here with a real mission to tackle inequalities. And I think that's something that's really important and is much more prominent in our operating model than in our predecessor organisations. There are inequalities in terms of how people can access services, in terms of the outcomes they get, and in terms of the experience they get in our service. We want to reduce that variation. We want to minimise that inequality. We know in Herefordshire and Worcestershire there's huge different types of life expectancy depending on where people live. We know there's huge variances in the ways that people can access services. Our job and our mission is going to be to reduce those inequalities, and there's lots that we can do to try and do that. And we're also here, and I think it's really important as well to understand and recognise the NHS is a huge part of our local economy and our local community. We employ lots and lots of people in a range of different roles. We must make sure as a public body that we're supporting our other partners in this broader social and economic development of Herefordshire and Worcestershire. Because actually, when we talk about what are the things that determine how healthy people are, the social and economic development of the two counties is a really important part of that. So we must do what we can to support the development of jobs and the local economy, to support the development of green space and housing policy and access to affordable housing. Those things are going to be critical determinants in whether we can achieve our wider mission, and we must play our part. The NHS must play its part in supporting partners in doing that. So how are we going to do that? What will enable us to do it better? A few things listed there. So this is all about integration, about joining people up, about aligning people alongside each other. The big change that's happened last night at midnight is no longer do we have to use competition as the lever to drive value. All of those quite onerous procurement regulations, actually a lot of them have been put to one side. We want to drive value by collaboration, by people working together. Our job as a board is to create the environment that allows people to work together, to join up physical and mental health services, to join up primary care, secondary care, community services, mental health services, to improve population health, to facilitate the voluntary sector engagement and involvement in this, and to do everything that we can to improve access to care. And you'll see on the right-hand side of the slide, there's lots of things that we can do that will enable that to happen. We're going to allocate our resources. We're going to prioritise collaboration. We're going to look for benefits of scale where that matters and where that makes a difference. But equally, we're going to promote localism and subsidiarity in the bottom up where that will get people better outcomes. And we're going to talk a lot, I'm sure, over the coming months about how we join up and share information and data for the benefits of patients and for the benefits of our community, because there's lots and lots of improvements that we can make in that area. And I thought I'd finish on, okay, so what today? What are we going to do this week, next week? What are we going to do over the next few months? And there's a list of things there which I think are the most important priorities. They are a bit NHS heavy at the moment because they're here and now priorities, largely around waiting times and some of the long waits and backlogs of care that we've got, improving cancer treatments, making sure the urgent care pathway works the best it possibly can to make it as safe as possible for patients, improving our financial sustainability, working in particular on our workforce development. So I think there's a good list of 8 priorities that will get us going during the next month or two, and I'm sure as a board we'll be coming back to talk about what our other operational priorities are. So Krishni, I'll stop there if that's okay. Happy to take any questions. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. So I just invite any comments and or questions from colleagues around the board. I can see Graham wants to come in. So Graham.
Thank you very much, Krishni. My name is Graham Hodgson. I'm the interim non-exec member for audit. Simon, I can't help it. I'm glad you got the first you're on mute in and it wasn't me. Makes a change. Simon, just a two-part little question for you. One from a patient perspective. If I was watching this presentation and I was on a waiting list, well, I'd be thinking, is it going to make a difference to me? I wonder if you could just give that one some consideration. And the second point I was going to ask you is, could you give a little bit of insight into the Simon Trickett mind? Simon, you know, your approach, your objectives will make a huge difference in the first 6 to 12 months. So, you know, what are your personal objectives and approach going to be?
Thanks, Graham. Sounds like a job interview, doesn't it? I thought I got the job already, yeah. I mean, first of all, the patient one, because that's a bit more straightforward. So we are working tirelessly, and colleagues are working tirelessly to try and reduce those waiting times. We've had an ambition to reduce 104-week waits, to eradicate them by the close of play yesterday. We've pretty much nearly got there, apart from a small handful of quite complicated orthodontics patients. The only way we've done that, though, is through applying a lot of those principles that I described in the presentation. So the only way we managed to get urology long waits down is by colleagues in Wye Valley helping and supporting colleagues in Worcestershire. The only way we've managed to deliver some of the other long waits is by collaboration with the independent sector. So actually, I think that's a really good example of where we've got people working together and supporting each other in a way they wouldn't have done previously. So there's real tangible benefits. But you know, it's Mount Everest, really, isn't it? Getting all of that backlog of care delivered and all of those needs met. It's going to be a long journey. We now move to our next target is we want to remove people that waited 78 weeks by the end of March. So huge amounts of work to do over the rest of this year. All of the operational planning is targeted at trying to help and support achieve that. But what I do know, if I was a patient, I have a lot more confidence in this system's ability to do that by working together than I would have if it was every man for himself, people going about doing their own job. So very clear benefit for patients around elective care waits that I see, and we'll seek, won't we, to demonstrate that and show people that. I mean, in terms of my personal objectives, I think you come into jobs like this to make a difference. I'm here to try and get better health outcomes for people. I wake up in the morning and come to work, try to do good things that give people the very best health outcomes. I think there's a whole host of value we can add by being that facilitator and that enabler of that. And that's really what I've seen over the last couple of years, because this isn't brand new. We've been on this journey for a while, really. And it is what inspires and motivates me, that opportunity to join people up and to help and support people to deliver better services. So my primary objective is really to totally embed that culture, attitude and approach. My reflection would be, I think it is quite embedded at leadership level. I think we're doing a reasonable job at leadership level in terms of our relationships. My personal objective is to try and make sure that filters down through the organisation. So those middle management levels that really make the difference on the ground. That's really personally what I'm seeking to achieve. I mean, the board and Krishni will hold me to account, I'm sure, for a whole host of other deliverables, a lot of which feature on that operational management priority slide. But actually, we're here to create. I see my job as to create the best possible environment, the best possible conditions that allow people to do a good job. So that's really what I'm here to do.
Thank you, Simon. You got the job.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks, Graham, for the question. Can I bring in Paul Walker, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Paul Walker. I'm the Chief Executive at Herefordshire Council. Good morning, everyone. And Simon, thank you for the presentation. I thought it was really helpful, actually. In just a few slides, it kind of brings together all that we're looking to achieve. And I know I'll be using that within my own organisation to help carry that message forward. But I had three kind of initial observations. Some of those have been touched on. And I think, firstly, for me, the slide on what is an integrated system kind of beautifully sets out the relationship between the strategic, how partners come together, and then how we work with the integrated care partnerships and the place-based partnerships around delivery. And I think that's really important, that we have a focus around strategy and strategic leadership and direction, but also recognising the role and the emphasis is on place-based partnership delivery. So I'm keen we can see how that comes together and we can articulate that. Secondly, for me, was the importance of reference to social and economic growth and the impact that that has on the determinants of health, and the role the ICB will play in terms of skills, recruitment, retention, economic growth on a county-wide perspective and on a partnership perspective across the two areas. But I think thirdly for me, and you and Graham have just touched on it, it's the cultural change that needs to be embedded as a result of this new system coming together, and how we as leaders set the tone for that cultural change by the work of the board and the work of the different elements of the system and how that comes together. And I think, you know, 3 comments there, but I think I would like to have a conversation a little today and perhaps later around that cultural change and how we collectively are going to lead that, and how do we check in and understand whether what we're doing is making a difference across the system and ultimately for our patients and residents.
Thank you very much, Paul. Some really sharply observed, sharp observations. Thank you. And I'll perhaps bring Simon in, but to comment further on that, and I'll certainly comment myself. But I'd like to bring in Paul Robinson next, and we can then go back to those observations. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on some of the questions that have already been asked, I'm Paul Robinson, Chief Executive of Worcestershire County Council. So the opposite number to Paul, really, in terms of 2 Pauls, not that easy, is it? But I think it's important for me to raise, we've already had the voice of the patient come through in both the questions and from Graham. I think I would also want to really emphasise that this is not just about dealing with backlogs, dealing with the here and now. It's very much about where we go in future. And the preventative approach is something that I think local authorities and community can really step up to the game here through this partnership. It's something we've been trying to do as a country for a long time, but certainly that preventative message, such that hopefully the people who sit in these seats in 20 to 30 years' time will have a slightly lower problem, or hopefully a lot lower problem than we have in terms of having to have acute treatment or primary treatment at the same time. So I think that's very, very important. And I just wanted to let you off, Simon. I've clearly made the first IT mistake in that my IT team can't get the background on at the moment. There's been some problems, so I'll let you off that accolade.
Thank you, Paul. That's very generous of you. Simon, do you want to come back in, and then I'll perhaps add to some comments as well.
I mean, some really good points and some really good generosity from Paul Robinson there in sparing a bit as well. So look, I think it's important for us as a board. We need to keep challenging ourselves about this. It's going to be really easy to be dragged into the day-to-day operational details and challenges in the system. We must do exactly what Paul and Paul have said and keep challenging ourselves to marry that short-term here and now perspective with an appropriate focus on the medium and longer term. And if we don't do that, actually we won't affect the changes that we're trying to achieve. This is all about culture. It's all about attitude. I think we're going to need to be quite brave. We're doing a whole load of work. We've just started with partners around identifying opportunities for less shift of resources. So further down the line, you know, the integrated care partnership and the strategy that we asked them to produce over the autumn, that's got to be appropriately focused on those long-term prevention actions that we can take. We can do lots of things that will help people live healthier lives. We must give them appropriate focus, because if we don't, we will not achieve our goals. And I think Paul Walker is very right to point out that whole social and economic growth element as well, because actually that does link to prevention. So the best way of helping people live healthier lives is giving them the best life opportunities and employment prospects, the best housing environment, the best access to affordable housing, and the best access to really good leisure facilities and green and open space. And all of those things have to feature on our agenda. So that's the challenge, I think, collectively for the board. Keep challenging ourselves to make sure those elements get appropriate airtime on our agenda, and we don't forget them, because this is the opportunity we've been giving, isn't it, to really focus on this in a way that we haven't done before.
Thanks, Simon. Any other comments before I bring this item to a close? Okay, I think my reflections, and I'd absolutely echo what Simon's just said, and I think completely share that, you know, both Paul's observations around the importance of the prevention agenda. The operational challenges would have been here whether we created the ICB or not, frankly, and we would have had to deal with those. So restoring our services and you know, addressing waiting lists, whether they're in our elective care or indeed community and mental health settings as well, where those same challenges exist. They're challenges we have to address, of course, and you know, we have to work together to address them. And you know, the more we support each other to do that, I think the better. The real opportunity is in the prevention agenda, is in the removal of perhaps some of the barriers for us to, you know, through things like different ways of commissioning, for example, to really think about how we're supporting the prevention agenda. And I know it's the cliche, and we will no doubt talk about it repeatedly, but somewhere along the line, we're going to have to demonstrate the left shift. We keep using that phrase. I know we've used that phrase a lot in other meetings in the past, but demonstrating that we've moved some of our resources upstream to ensure that we get the earliest possible intervention to support people to stay well rather than get, you know, deal with illness when people are acutely unwell. So absolutely must get that balance right. And I think that is, as Simon said, the job of all of us together, to challenge ourselves to make sure we get the balance right. I certainly see that as a key part of my function, and the function of particularly non-executive colleagues, because frankly, you know, we're not here to deal with the operational issues. So it is about making sure that we keep a focus on the sort of longer term changes we need to make, as well as make sure we've got the resources, the support, the collaboration needed to address some of those short-term challenges. So it's getting the balance right, and I absolutely would encourage everybody to yeah, you know, just be open about those challenges, because we've got to keep asking ourselves those questions. And I think part of what I would like to do, obviously as a board, I think it's important for us. Of course, we will be having public board meetings. We will be obviously discussing some of these issues and addressing some of these issues in our public meetings. We will also need a strategic board time, development time, and I would strongly encourage all board members to participate in those, because in many ways those are our opportunities to do some thinking together about how we address some of those challenges. And I think that's the place where we really need to you know, ensure we're all I guess adopting the same sort of behavioural change that we need to make. You know, Paul Walker touched on cultural change, and I think that's all about tone, and it's all about how, you know, how we work together and set the right tone for what's ahead. So I'm very keen to encourage us to take that time together to really develop on those priorities, and I know we've got some sessions planned in the coming months to do that. So thank you very much, Simon, for taking us through the slides, and thank you everyone for their comments and questions. So we now need to move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is the formal establishment items. And at this point, I'd like to hand over to Hannah, please.
Thank you, Krishni, and apologies, I should have introduced myself earlier. So I'm Hannah Taylor, I'm the Director of Corporate Services and Chief of Staff for the ICB, and I'm also the Company Secretary for the ICB Board. So the purpose of this part of the board meeting is to formally endorse and approve key governance arrangements and documents relating to the establishment of NHS Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Board. So I will summarise all the items covered by this report and then go through all the recommendations. I'm afraid there are quite a few, but then I will invite questions at the end. So firstly, I'd like you to note the appointment of ICB board members. They have all been formally appointed earlier today in line with the legislative framework and the process set out by NHSEI. So the board is therefore asked to formally note the appointment of Krishni Waring as the ICB chair, Simon Trickett as the Chief Executive and Accountable Emergency Officer, Dr. Will Taylor as the Medical Director, Dr. Catherine Cobain as the Director of Nursing, Caldecott Guardian and Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, Sarah Dugan, Matthew Hopkins and Jane Ives as the partner members for NHS Trusts. And in addition, Sarah Dugan is also the partner member and a board member with knowledge and experience in connection with services relating to the prevention, diagnosis and treatment of mental illness. Paul Robinson and Paul Walker as the partner members for local authority, Dr. Nicole Berger and Dr. Nigel Fraser as the partner members for primary medical services, Graham Hodgkin as the non-executive member with responsible for audit, and I should also add conflicts of interest guardian, and apologies for omitting this from the paper. So the two roles are closely connected, and the ICB does need a conflicts of interest guardian, so that role does fall to the chair of the audit committee. David Whiteman as the non-executive member with responsibility for remuneration, Dr. Sarah Raystrick as the non-executive member with a focus upon health inequalities, participation and engagement, and a board member leading on environmental sustainability. So I would also like to draw to your attention the fact that one further non-executive member who will be the chair of Quality, Resources and Delivery Committee is still to be appointed. So the role is currently being advertised and the process should conclude by the end of July or early August. The intention is then that once all 4 non-executive members have been appointed, expressions of interest will be sought for the appointment of ICB Deputy Chair. And then I'll move to the next recommendation, which relates to the appointment of founder member of the Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Partnership. So as of today, and Simon mentioned this in his presentation, the Integrated Care Partnership is now formally established as a statutory committee jointly formed between Herefordshire Council, Worcestershire County Council and the ICB. And the ICB is required to identify a founder member at its inaugural meeting. So the proposal is for this to be Krishni Waring, the chair of the ICB. In order to fulfill this role. So then the next recommendation is to formally note and endorse the constitution and standing orders of the ICB. So all ICBs are required to have NHSEI approved constitution and standing orders. And these set out the statutory framework, board membership, process for appointing its members, as well as the arrangements for exercising its functions. It also does include the process for varying the constitution and the process that the ICB needs to go through in order to do that. So the full constitution and standing orders are appended to this report as Appendix 1, and the board isn't asked to approve this. This is really for NHSEI to do, and they have already approved the constitution at the end of May. This is now in fact in place since midnight, but I would just like you to formally endorse and note it at this point. Then the next set of recommendations relate to the approval of supporting governance documents, collectively referred to as the governance handbook. So these documents have been locally developed and are largely based on the ICB operating framework. So specifically, these are the scheme of reservation and delegation, which set out the functions and decisions of the ICB, which have been both retained by the full board and those that have been delegated to individuals and specific committees. So the full sword is attached as Appendix 2 to this report. Then we have the standing financial instructions and the detailed financial instructions, which are attached to the report as Appendices 3 and 3B. So these are key documents for sound internal governance control, which define the purpose, responsibilities and legal framework and operating environment of the ICB. Then the next set of appendices relate to the establishment of ICB committees, and pages 4 and 5 of this report detail the committees which are proposed to be set up and the associated chairing arrangements. So specifically, these are the Audit Committee chaired by Graham Hodgkin, Appointments and Remuneration Committee, chaired by David Whiteman. Non-executive Appointments and Remuneration Panel, chaired by Krishni Waring. Quality Resources and Delivery Committee, initially chaired by Martin Lee, until the non-executive member with responsibility for this committee is appointed. Then we have Strategic Commissioning Committee, chaired by Dr. Sarah Raistrick. She is the non-executive member for Health Inequalities, Participation and Engagement. And finally, Operation Executive Committee, chaired by Simon Trickett, the ICB Chief Executive. So the terms of reference for these committees have been appended and are included as appendices 4A to 4F. So then linked to these approvals that have already been proposed to the board is the approval of the ICB functions and decisions map. So this is a high-level summary document which sets out the ICB operating model, and this is attached as Appendix 5. Next is the approval of the ICB management conflicts of interest, gifts and hospitality and standards of business conduct policy, which is attached as Appendix 6. So this policy sets out how the ICB will manage conflicts and potential conflicts of interest, and how we will observe legal principles relating to gifts, hospitality and commercial sponsorship, as well as ensuring that all our staff uphold standards of business conduct. Then the penultimate recommendation relates to the adoption of CCG policy. So when the 4 CCGs in Herefordshire and Worcestershire merged in April 2020, all policies were reviewed thoroughly and aligned across the 2 counties. They have also been included in the readiness to operate statement process and the due diligence process overseen by NHS England and improvement to ensure that they are adequate and suitable to move into the new organisation. So given that the ICB takes on all legal duties and responsibilities of the CCG, it is proposed at this point that initially all CCG policies are adopted by the ICB and reviewed in line with their planned review date. And finally, you'll be pleased to note, the board is asked to note that a comprehensive due diligence programme has been undertaken over the last few months as part of transitioning from CCG to ICB. And as already mentioned, this was fully assured by NHS England and Improvement. And an assurance report will be submitted to the ICB Audit Committee in August 2020 as the receiving organisation. So all the recommendations are listed in the body of the report, and I would like you to formally note, endorse or approve them, please. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and I appreciate for everybody that's it's a long list of recommendations and approvals that we need to offer, but an important step in the establishment of the board today. Can I just open it up for any comments or questions for Hannah before we take that step of closing the item? Sarah.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks, Hannah, to you and your team for all the work that's gone into that. I think it's quite obvious to all of us this hasn't come about easily. So if you can pass on thanks to the team, that would be much appreciated. It was really just a point. I think you've articulated it well, but it's a lot of policies for us as a board to take on the responsibility for. So it was really just to seek assurance that you're confident with the process that's happened within the CCG, and that you said the policies would be reviewed at their planned review date. Really just the assurance that you're happy with a good process for that, and the review dates are going to be timely and appropriate for us as a board to look at. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much for your thanks, really, and I will pass them on to the team. So yeah, no, I think absolutely. So I mean, we do have a really robust process for policy review and a database of policies that's being centrally managed, making sure that all policies are either in date or are reviewed promptly. So the policies which really relate specifically to the ICB is the conflicts of interest policy, and that's the one that has been reviewed ahead of establishment because it's really important to reflect some of the changes and some of the statutory responsibilities. And the next one on our list is the risk management policy and strategy, because clearly that needs to reflect the operation of the ICB as well. But yes, all other policies we have been through them. We are happy they are still current and in date, and they will be subject to the regular plan of review. And Krishna, may I just make one addition? I think I have missed Mark Dutton from my list of formal appointments, and I would hate to do that and for that not to be formally recorded. So I would just like to add that Mark Dutton has also been appointed to the board as the Chief Finance Officer and the Senior Information Risk Officer. So I just want to make sure that's minuted and noted. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Mark was getting a little bit nervous there, I suspect. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Okay, so can I take it that we are happy to approve and endorse the recommendations on the basis? Obviously, this is, you know, many of these steps have already been subject to rigorous scrutiny and assessment by NHS England, and therefore, you know, some of those steps have been covered off there. And obviously, we note particularly Hannah's assurance to Sarah regarding the review of policies. And so, everyone happy to support the approval? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. I don't think I've been a founder member of anything before, so I feel quite privileged to be the founder member of this board. And I think Sarah gets the accolade for longest job title, Sarah Raystrick, for because she's got that many things in her non-executive role title. But anyway, so thank you very much, and thanks again to Hannah and her team. Okay, we now move on to item 8. Having formally noted Mark's appointment as well, Mark, it's over to you for item 8 on the delegated commissioning.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, I'm Mark Dutton. I was slightly twitched as I hadn't heard my name, but I'm the ICB Chief Finance Officer. So the paper today is the first part really of our journey in an integrated care board with some of the delegated services that will start to come our way from NHS England as we go forward. So we already have delegated services for primary medical services, and that delegation agreement will novate across from the CCG to the ICB. But as we start to go forward, further services will be delegated from NHS England around pharmacy, ophthalmic and dentistry services, so potentially around another £70 million attached to that. And then as we go forward, we'll also get our funding allocation for specialised services, which is very complex, high specialised activity, and that's potentially around another £260 to £280 million worth of funding. So today's the first part in this journey. So as we go forward, we need to sign the delegation agreement. So today the first part is asking really for authority for Simon to sign off that delegation agreement. We'll still continue to work then very jointly with NHS England around understanding the financial resources and the due diligence element, but this is the first part really and allow us to start that partnership agreement with them. We've been through the delegation agreement. It's very similar to the one we've got for primary medical services. It's a 94-page document which details everything under statute, which then gets delegated and transferred to us. So that's my first ask of the board today, Chair. The second one then is just to make the board aware, particularly around specialised services. There's more work to do on this, but we'll need to at some point enter a formal risk share agreement, because it's looking like specialised services will remain pooled and effectively then becomes risk shared across all of ICB within the Midlands region. We will share that risk share agreement when we have it with partner members of the board so people can see that. So it's just a heads up really that we'll be requiring a virtual approval probably before we meet in September. But that's the purpose really of the update and the paper today, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Are there any comments or questions of clarification to Mark about the paper or the recommendation? So, Sarah Dugan.
Thanks, Krishni. Sarah Dugan, ICB partner member. It was just a question to Mark, Krishni, if I may, about just the risks associated with this delegation. Support the delegated authority that's requested, but clearly there's quite significant risks and liabilities coming with some elements of this new delegation. So it was just to make sure as a board we were clear how we were going to be cited on those in due course. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Mark?
Thank you. It's a really good question. So we know both with the specialised service element, there is financial pressure and risk associated with that. as there also is with the what we refer to as POD, the pharmaceutical, optometry and dental services, we will be doing a lot more work around the due diligence before we accept the full financial transfer. To start with, we will jointly commission alongside NHSE, particularly around the first part, which is the pharmacy, optometry and dental element. And we have agreed that we do want to understand the due diligence and the financials associated with that, particularly given we've got a lot of pressures around dental services and high demand. So again, we need to understand what's coming back into our system. So there'll be more work that we will share with the board around that. This is the first part that around the agreement aspect. The risk share element with specialised services is a bit more complex because that's not going to transfer yet. That will stay with NHS England, and there's a whole rebasing exercise to take place around the resources. So again, as we go further through the year, we'll bring back updates to the ICB around that progress, what the financials are looking like, and again, we can debate some of the risk element then that sits there. Sitting as part of a risk share framework with wider partners will give us more financial security, because we know specialised being very complex, it's very expensive numbers of procedures. But again, we'll share more information with the board on that as we go through the year.
Are you satisfied, assured by that, Sarah? Great, thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments? So is the board happy to support the recommendation that of the authority to be delegated to the chief executive on the first point, and note the risks and other issues that Mark has highlighted? Everyone happy to support that? Great. Thank you very much. So I think that concludes all of the formal business we had on the agenda. Hannah, am I right in thinking that there's nothing else that we need to cover formally?
No, that's it. Thank you, Krishni. That's everything.
Okay. So in terms of the formal part of this meeting, we can bring the meeting to a close. I will just highlight that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 21st of September at 9:30. The intention is to keep our meetings virtual because they will obviously, you know, there is a kind of issue for us around accessibility. So certainly in terms of our public meetings, we feel that having them virtual is going to enable that. So that's the plan currently. And also a brief comment really, that although that might seem quite a long time away, given we've just sort of started having this, you know, first meeting today, we clearly have to recognise the practicalities of holiday periods and that sort of thing. But we will be meeting informally in the meantime, and part of that will be to sort of develop our agenda together indeed, and make sure we're really clear about our priorities going forward. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank everybody formally for joining us today, and close the formal part of the meeting. Now, we do have a